It has been over a month since a foreign military arrested the sitting president of another country. That country doesn't collapse. No riots. No coup. No civil war. Instead, the army calmly swears loyalty to someone else. How does a country replace its leader while he's still alive and shouting from a prison cell in another nation? Can anyone imagine this happening? A country's head of state gets thrown into prison, and 1 month later, the country doesn't descend into chaos. Instead, it calmly establishes a new center of power. Yet that's exactly what's unfolding right now in Venezuela. In early January 2026, New York, former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro slammed his fist against the defendant's railing and shouted in Spanish, "This is illegal. I am still the legitimate president of Venezuela." His wife, Cilia Flores, had visible bruises on her face, casting a shadow over the trial from the very beginning. In late January 2026, Caracas, a ceremony that would fundamentally reshape Venezuela's power structure, was being broadcast on the country's national television. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez stood before senior commanders from all branches of the armed forces, rows of military flags lined up behind him. The camera then cut to interim President Delcy Rodriguez. The former oil minister, now 60, maintained a calm, controlled expression. Lopez raised his right hand and slowly read the oath. The armed forces swear absolute loyalty and obedience to interim President Delcy Rodriguez, as empowered by the Constitution. We will defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity with our lives. One by one, the heads of the Interior Ministry, National Security Agency, and every other power institution stepped forward to swear the same oath. The entire ceremony lasted 37 minutes. Not a single senior officer was absent. CNN's commentator couldn't help but remark during the real-time broadcast, "This doesn't look like a temporary stopgap, but it looks more like a carefully rehearsed transfer of power." For anyone who knows the history of China's Ming dynasty, what happened in Venezuela in 2026 was like the power shift in Beijing almost 600 years ago, when the Mongols captured the Ming emperor. One cannot help but ask, what happens when a country's leader is captured, not voted out, not overthrown, but taken away by another regime? In 1449, China's emperor was captured at Tumu Fortress. In 2026, Venezuela's president was arrested and flown to the US. 6 centuries apart. Same shock. And yet, neither country collapsed. In Ming China, the emperor was the son of heaven. If he fell, the empire should have fallen with him. But the court made a brutal decision. The state itself mattered more than the emperor himself. A new ruler was installed. The former emperor's brother became the new emperor. The capital was defended. The captured emperor was quietly set aside. Now fast forward to Venezuela. After Nicolas Maduro was arrested, chaos was expected. Instead, the military stood in formation and swore loyalty to someone else, the country's acting president, who was Maduro's vice president before. No tanks. No riots. Just a televised oath to an interim president. Here's the key insight. In both cases, the state survived by doing the same thing. Creating a new center of power, immediately. But the outcomes diverge. In the Ming dynasty of China, the system revolved around a single person, the emperor. So when the captured emperor returned, the system bent back and broke again. In modern Venezuela, the system moved on. Once power shifted, the men became optional. That's the real lesson. In history, states that survive aren't the most moral. They're the most adaptable. When leaders disappear, the countries that survive are the ones that don't wait for them to come back. The Ming China proved it 6 centuries ago, and Venezuela proved it several days ago. On January 3, the US captured Maduro and his wife and then flew them to New York. According to a later leaked US military report, the entire operation, from rappelling down to capturing Maduro and his wife, took just 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Maduro and his wife were led away in pajamas. Later that morning, the White House press secretary presented what she called evidence at a press briefing, hundreds of pages of financial records and testimony from several cooperating witnesses. She emphasized, "The United States does not recognize Maduro as a head of state, and therefore, he enjoys no immunity. He will face a fair trial under U.S. law." The move sent shockwaves around the world. Brazilian President Lula condemned it in a nationally televised address the next day, calling it the imposition of jungle law on the international community, an outrageous act of power politics overriding multilateralism. Cuba's foreign ministry issued a 6-page statement labeling the operation state terrorism and demanding an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. That meeting quickly deadlocked. A permanent member of the UNSC vetoed a draft resolution condemning the U.S. action. Russia reacted sharply. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova posted a video online, sarcastically saying, "Welcome to the New World Order led by the U.S., where international law is nothing more than scrap paper to be torn up at will." Yet while the international community argued, something unexpected happened inside Venezuela. In the first 3 days after Maduro's capture, small protests did break out in Caracas. Supporters held up his portrait and chanted slogans, but the scale was far smaller than most observers had expected. Around January 10, a subtle shift began. The ruling party held several closed-door meetings. Details weren't released, but leaks afterward suggested that most factions had reached the same conclusion. The country cannot be frozen because of one man. On January 15, the Supreme Court Chief Justice issued a brief statement saying that due to special circumstances, it was not appropriate to invoke Article 233 of the Constitution on absolute absence of the president. That meant no mandatory election within 30 days, and it cleared the way for Delcy Rodriguez to exercise full presidential authority as interim leader. So who is Delcy Rodriguez, and why is she chosen? Before becoming interim president, she was already well known in global energy circles. She holds a PhD in economics and served as Minister of Energy and Petroleum for 5 years during the Chavez era, leading major negotiations with giants such as Rosneft and China National Petroleum Corporation. Western media often describe her as a pragmatic technocrat, a sharp contrast to Maduro's charismatic, street politics style. Her brother currently serves as head of the National Assembly, a position of enormous influence. That combination of technical credibility and family networks made her the one figure acceptable to both party factions and the military in a moment of crisis. The military's stance was decisive. On January 28, the day before the loyalty oath, the Armed Forces Strategic Command held an 8-hour closed-door meeting. According to participants, there was only one question on the table: how to prevent the military from splintering and the country from sliding into civil war when the head of state has been captured. The consensus was clear: there had to be a single, legitimate object of loyalty immediately, and under the Constitution, Rodriguez was the only option. The defense minister put it bluntly in his internal remarks. The military's duty is to defend the country, not one individual. Right now, the country needs unity. Washington was clearly watching closely. On the afternoon of January 29, the same day the Venezuelan military swore allegiance, something quiet but significant happened in the international waters of the Caribbean. The U.S. Coast Guard handed over the oil tanker Sophia, which it had seized 37 days earlier, to a team from a Venezuelan state oil company. The transfer was unusually low-key. No media. No official statement. Just a simple handover document. The Sophia, a mid-sized tanker flying the Panamanian flag, had been seized in early December 2025 for allegedly violating sanctions by transporting Venezuelan crude oil. Its return came with no publicly stated conditions, but sources say the U.S. sent a message through intermediaries: it hoped to open a pragmatic dialogue. It was the first quiet signal that Washington was ready to deal with Venezuela's new power center, without saying it out loud. While the raid achieved its tactical goal, capturing Maduro and his wife, it put Washington in a strategic bind. Beyond widespread opposition from Latin America, criticism at home also intensified. The chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee openly questioned the legality of the operation and demanded convincing and solid evidence from the White House. But the most immediate pressure came from the energy market. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves. Much of it is heavy crude, expensive to extract but vital to U.S. refineries. After Maduro's arrest, Venezuelan oil exports to the U.S. briefly froze, tightening supplies at several Gulf Coast refineries and causing gasoline prices to fluctuate. The Wall Street Journal put it bluntly. Arresting one man is easy. Running a country's oil industry is another matter. Returning the tanker was a carefully crafted signal. It sent at least two messages. First, the U.S. was willing to deal with Rodriguez's new government. Second, oil cooperation was back on the table. Analysts say Washington's possible demands include guarantees that new oil contracts with U.S. companies won't be affected by past sanctions, and that Venezuela toned down its criticism of the U.S. in international forums, including the UN. So the key question remains, can Maduro get out? Will the U.S. release him, as the Mongols returned the Ming Emperor 6 centuries ago? Legally, Maduro's case is now deep inside the U.S. Justice Department's criminal process. His next court date is set for March 10, 2026. His American legal team is arguing illegal arrest and political persecution, but most legal experts see little chance of success. A former U.S. federal prosecutor involved in similar extradition cases said anonymously, "Once you're in this system, especially with a narcoterrorism label, almost nobody walks away clean. The Justice Department can't afford to lose this case. It would be both a political and judicial disaster." Politically, Maduro's value is fading fast. For Rodriguez's now stable government, he has become an awkward symbol. Pushing hard for his release risks closing the fragile window for dialogue with Washington. Abandoning him entirely could anger party elders still loyal to him. It is like the new emperor of the Ming dynasty did not wish the Mongols to return his brother to him. So the current approach is a balancing act. Continue publicly condemning the arrest as illegal and calling for Maduro's release, but avoid making it a core condition in real diplomatic and economic negotiations. Interestingly, China, Russia and many other nations made such remarks publicly to demand that the U.S. release Maduro, but they took no action for his freedom. On January 30, Rodriguez told the public, "We call on the United States to correct its mistake and release President Maduro. At the same time, the Venezuelan government has a responsibility to maintain national stability and the well-being of our people." Most observers interpreted this as clear subtext: freeing Maduro is a request, not a deal-breaker. It means whether the U.S. sets him free or not is not a big deal anymore for the new power center of Venezuela. China's response added another heavyweight layer to the equation. On February 3, at a regular press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian spent nearly 7 minutes addressing Venezuela. His language was unusually harsh. "The United States has flagrantly violated basic norms of international relations by sending troops into another country to seize its leader. It is naked hegemonic behavior and a serious violation of international law." He emphasized that the action violated the UN Charter, infringed on Venezuela's sovereignty, and undermined regional stability, and that China firmly opposed it. The next day, Venezuela's foreign minister publicly thanked China on social media. Notably, China never mentioned Maduro by name, only Venezuela as a state. Scholars say this reflects China's consistent non-interference stance, opposing violations of sovereignty without tying itself to any specific political figure, preserving room to work with any future legitimate government. The outline of the situation is now clear. Maduro is now a U.S. prisoner, literally a nobody. Caracas has returned to normal traffic and business. Rodriguez's government has announced an economic emergency plan focused on stabilizing electricity and food supplies. Low-level U.S. State Department officials have begun informal contacts with Venezuela's UN delegation. At the Security Council, debates continue, but the focus has quietly shifted from how to rescue Maduro to how to prevent this from happening again, and how to help Venezuela stabilize. It is said that in a handwritten note recently sent out through his lawyers, Maduro wrote, "My spirit belongs to Venezuela." No Venezuelan state media published it. That evening, national television devoted 15 minutes to showing interim President Rodriguez inspecting a new housing project, with crowds applauding her. News about the former president appeared only as a single scrolling line at the bottom of the screen. Relevant authorities continue to express concern through various channels regarding former President Maduro's situation. It stayed on screen for about 10 seconds, then disappeared, replaced by the weather forecast. The arrest of Maduro has become the past, a story to show America's tactical triumph and strategic failure. Penny wise, pound foolish. Typical Trump style.